Oh, okay. I think that we we are live. Sorry, everyone. Technical glitches over here. My name is Emily, and welcome to our live interview for today. I am the community manager here at 2 Diabetes, working with the Diabetes Hands Foundation, and today we are meeting with one of our all-time favorite interviewees, Gary Scheiner, who is brought to us today by BD, and they will be bringing him to us every other month for the rest of the year because that's how much we love Gary Scheiner. CDE. Gary, camera is on you. Why do we love you so much?
I have no idea,
Oh,
but
come on.
if you didn't look so good, we'd all be really upset about these technical glitches. But
Oh, well, thank you. You're a flatterer. Who are you and what do you do?
what business do I have being here? Let's see. First and foremost, I've had type 1 diabetes for 30 years. I've written several books on the subject. I work as a certified diabetes educator in private practice. My practice specializes in intensive insulin therapy. We've got clients nationwide and worldwide and work with them through phone and internet and video and all that good stuff. A lot of data downloads. I wrote Think Like a Pancreas years ago, just second edition came out last year. Was Diabetes Educator of the Year last year. Put me on the road quite a bit, doing quite a bit of travel and lecturing. That was kind of fun. What else? Oh, that's enough.
That's a
So,
lot.
so I got to deal with diabetes at work all day, and then deal with my own when I get home.
Let's talk about that. So you help other people with their diabetes all day, and then simultaneously you have your own case of diabetes, and then you go home and you continue to have your own case of diabetes. Tell us a little bit about how that works for you.
I'm kind of like the best barber in town who has the worst haircut. Just in theory anyway. I take really good care of my patients. I don't take as good care of myself, unfortunately. I've got my share of ups and downs with my blood sugars. I'm really religious and consistent about my workouts. That's something I get in on a daily basis. What I'm not so regimented about is my diet. I take a lot of liberties with my food intake. I preach to my
What are
patients.
liberties? What do
Well,
you consider to be liberties?
um, probably more grazing than anything. I preach to my patients how important it is to put adequate space between meals and snacks, just to give the insulin a chance to do its thing. And eating too frequently just doesn't work. You just can't manage blood sugars well that way. And I wish I listened to that more. My other real vice is when I have low blood sugar. Oh my God, do I go to town? It's anything that's not nailed down, I'll eat. It's just not a good situation. It's something I need to work on.
So you can absolutely empathize with folks who come to you for help with their diabetes and who have this same issue. I don't think it's an uncommon challenge that when we have low blood sugar, of course, it seems like every cell in the body is just screaming, eat.
Feed me.
Right, right. And it's true that for a lot of us, we're lucky if there's anything left in our refrigerator after a period of low blood sugar. Do you have tips that you give others, whether or not you're able to follow them yourself, that you give folks about managing that moment of desperation and attempting not to eat everything in the house?
Well, the phrase I use, and I borrowed this from a Simpsons episode, is when we're low, we become remorseless eating machines. But it takes discipline. It takes willpower, I think, to overcome that. I mean, I really teach using just dextrose. I feel that when we start using off-the-shelf, off-the-counter kinds of foods, that's when we can get in trouble. I try to steer people to different dextrose food sources and just sticking with those and customizing the quantity because it is different for different people in different situations. You can't treat a 4-year-old child the same way as a grown adult in terms of how much they need to eat when they're low. And then you have to also consider the direction your blood sugar is headed. If it's quite low and still dropping fast, you're going to need a lot more carb than if it's one of those milder, leveling off kind of lows. That's where CGM is so helpful, being able to see, the rate of change and the direction your glucose is heading at the time. So I'm a big advocate of using the continuous glucose monitors for that as well as a lot of other things.
Before, we want to talk about CGMs today, but there are a number of people talking about this whole issue of sort of ravaging the refrigerator or the corner store or whatever when we're low. It's clearly it's a topic for a lot of people. It's certainly something that I battle with, especially for lows that occur in the middle of the night. So I'm going to lay out a scenario for you that is I would say, relatively common one for me. And I would love to hear your tips, advice, knowledge about maybe a better way to handle the situation. So I wake up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., let's say, disoriented, sweaty, confused, all that stuff. I've had diabetes long enough that I don't have to be able to actually think to know that my blood sugar is low. It's a knee-jerk reaction for me. If I wake up and I'm confused, I know I'm low, I immediately, automatically head to the kitchen where I consume everything, as you said. I have things that are fast sugars, I have things that are slow sugars, I have things that are fats. I really smorgasbord the kitchen out. And then once I've sort of regained myself a bit, I sort of look around at the damage that I've done, and I try to come up with an amount of insulin to do to cover the added unnecessary carbohydrate that I piled on top of what I did need in order to rectify my hypoglycemia. So, and I pick a random number for an amount of insulin that seems kind of reasonable. I do that, and then I go back to sleep. Just as I'm saying it, I'm embarrassed because it sounds so, it's perilous and it sounds terrible. And I'm just having faith in our wonderful community that you have compassion and you understand and you're not judging me.
And I've done it myself, so I understand
Gary,
where
what
you're
should we
coming
do?
from. All right, well, there's a few things to consider. First off, I did the math on this. If you treat low blood sugar, let's say twice a week, with just glucose tablets, and compare that to treating a low blood sugar twice a week with just a single Snickers bar, which in our situations is probably a very conservative treatment. Over the course of a year, it adds up to over 24,000 calories difference. Yeah, that's the good scream.
Oh my God.
You think about the weight potential, weight gain potential that can cause. That's a good motivator for treating them right. Then you have to consider how quickly different foods bring the blood sugar up. No one wants to stay low any longer than they have to be. The real danger in hypoglycemia is not how low you get, it's how long you're low. There's research that shows this out of Stanford, that the longer you're low, the greater the chances that you're going to wind up losing consciousness or worse. You could go very low. If you recover quickly, you'll be all right. But if you stay low a long time, that's when it really becomes dangerous. So you want to use food that's fast. And a lot of our pleasure foods, I don't know what you'd call them, the foods that just give us like the ice creams, chocolate, things like that, are really slow at bringing blood sugar up. It's going to take an hour or more to see a significant effect. So again, treating with the fastest thing possible, which is dextrose, is the way to go. There's a danger involved with every low where your decision making can be off, your coordination. Now, you live in the Bay Area, and you've got to have multiple levels in your house because no one lives on a ranch in the Bay Area. And when you're walking up and down steps in a state of hypoglycemia, there's a good chance you're going to fall and hurt yourself. Not to mention people who drive and get behind the wheel while they're still low. So there's a danger there too. You want to bring that blood sugar up as quickly as possible. And every low blood sugar we have hurts the chances that we're going to recognize the next one early enough to do something about it. It's called hypoglycemia unawareness. And it's actually a kind of an adjustment that the central nervous system makes in response to lows. These cells of the brain that detect hypoglycemia become more efficient, and they get glucose easily, so they don't recognize the low quite as well. So there's a lot of reasons to treat these lows right and keep them from repeating. Now, dextrose is not just found in the glucose tablets. Some people don't mind the tablets, others do. I recognize that. Yeah, you don't like them. They come in a lot of flavors. But there's also a lot of candies. There you go. There are a lot of candies that are made with dextrose that work very, very well, as well as glucose tablets do. And that includes Smarties and Sweet Tarts and Nerds and Runts and Airheads and what else we got here? Bottle caps, Pixie Sticks. Remember those sugar things in the straw? Pixie Sticks made with dextrose. So if you find a candy where dextrose is one of those top ingredients, that's a good treatment for a low. The trick is to not eat the stuff until you need it, because if you eat it and then you don't have it when you're low because it was there. So you got to be careful about that. And then the quantity is the other thing. It's really easy to overtreat. And we wind up with these skyrocketing blood sugars later on whenever that happens. So treating with the right amount of carb is helpful. Now, somebody that is my size, I'm going to get about maybe a 3.5-point rise from every gram of carbohydrate. You might get a 4-point rise from every gram. The smaller the person, the more every gram of carb will raise them. So you can kind of guesstimate it. For a child, they're going to rise anywhere from 5 to 10 points for every gram of carb. For a heavy set adult, there may only be a 1 or 2-point rise for every gram of carb. So you can see where the difference in treatment comes in. And the goal usually is to get the blood sugar up to around 120, give or take. But you also have to take into account what direction your glucose is headed. If you got a low that's just kind of leveling off, I've got my marker board. I can sketch this out. A fairly conservative low. Look at that.
I can't see that.
See my marker board?
Yeah.
All right, so if you've got a low where the blood sugar is doing something like this, where it's kind of leveling off, you can treat that with the standard amount of carbohydrate, and it should work fine. Versus a low where the blood sugar is accelerating downward. So if it's doing one of these, it's really dropping fast, you're going to need to not only reverse that trend, but then treat the low, and that's going to take extra carbs. For most people, anywhere from 5 to 20 extra grams of carbohydrate are necessary when the blood sugar is accelerating down. The CGM is a good way to look at that. And those who don't have CGM, I would say that if you have a lot of insulin on board from a previous bolus or injection, you ought to increase the carb amount. And if you're low during exercise, you ought to increase it as well because it's probably dropping pretty fast. That help at all?
Yeah, I learned I should eat a Snickers bar in the middle of the night.
A Snickers bar. I think in your case, the best solution is to not go into the kitchen at all.
Yeah.
You need to have your treatment right at your bedside. A, it's safer, and B, it's going to help you avoid all the temptations that are in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you limit yourself to what's at your bedside, package it up in a little baggie or something. Put a skull and crossbones on so no one else eats it. This is Emily's low stuff. Do not touch for fear of death, and that's only for you. Only use it when you're having lows, and just set in your mind, when I'm low, this is all I'm eating. That's it. I'm not going to consume all the extra calories. I'm not going to prolong my low by eating the wrong things, and I'm not going to overshoot by eating too much. Prepare ahead of time. Have it there right at your bedside. Same thing. If you drive, keep it in your car. Keep the treatment right there in your car. At work, keep it right in your desk or in your briefcase. Have it accessible So you're not going to be tempted to go for the vending machines or the cookie jar, whatever's available.
There's a question in the chat room. Tim Beek 48 is asking, what is a good target for nighttime blood glucose?
Yeah, depends on the person. Some people like their blood sugars to run very tight all the time. They might like to have their readings in the 90, 100 range. Other people like to be more conservative at night because they maybe have a history of severe lows, or they have severe hypo-unawareness. They might feel more comfortable in the 120 to 140 range. During pregnancy, we have to run pretty tight around the clock, including at night. I think one game changer we have are the continuous monitors because of the alarm systems that they have. It makes it safer to run tighter blood sugars around the clock because they'll warn us if we're starting to get a little too low. So that it changes kind of the risk-benefit profile changes, and we can get tighter management overall.
Mm-hmm. We have a few people who are in the chat room right now who I think have probably attended past talks of yours and are interested in what are the things that you are testing out right now, and particularly what pump and CGM are you using?
Well, first off, I am amazed they came back. I really appreciate that.
You're very entertaining.
My ego just went like that.
You guys don't do that to him. Don't explode his ego.
Testing out, I had a chance to wear the Animus Vibe for about 3 weeks recently, and it was really neat having the Dexcom integrated into the pump. I had this feeling of kind of solidarity. I didn't have to carry a bunch of loose stuff with me. I had my pump to deliver my insulin. I had my CGM built right in to tell me what my blood sugar was. Then all I needed was a little magic wand to count carbs. I'd be all set. You still have to do that with your brain. But it was nice having all of that built in together in one device. Tandem is working on integrating Dexcom into their pump. Hopefully we'll see that shortly. From what I understand, it's passed all of the FDA's requirements thus far. They haven't had any issues, so we're hoping to see that fairly soon. The next generation Dexcom, the G5 system, reportedly will be integrating with the Asante Snap and with the Omnipod programmer as well. Dexcom just got approval on a new Dexcom G4 called the Dexcom G4 Share. So what they did is they took the Dexcom receiver and stuck a Bluetooth chip in it so that it sends a signal to a cell phone that's nearby. And what that cell phone would do, it would have an app installed that will transmit the data to a cloud-based server. And anybody, well, I think up to 5 people who are authorized to receive the data by the user can actually get the blood sugar data on their iPhones. So that it just makes it a lot easier for family, loved ones, etc., to be able to track someone's blood sugars, just from a safety standpoint. So I had a family here just yesterday in the office. They have a 5-year-old son, and they're really eager to do that so he can go to school, go to friends' houses, and the mom doesn't have to sit there panicking in a cold sweat all the time worrying about her son's blood sugar. She can just look at his phone and just see how he's doing. So that'll be nice. Right now, I am wearing my Asante Snap pump. I got a customized pump from them. I got it in, I don't know if you can see, but the color is actually the Philadelphia Eagles green. It's like a really dark bluish green. And it's a neat pump. It's got a full color, nice color screen. I've been pretty impressed with this.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about what are the things that you like about this one.
Super lightweight, very, very lightweight pump. You don't have to change batteries. And what you do with this pump is about every week or so, you change out something called the pump body. The pump body holds a 300-unit pre-filled insulin cartridge that you just snap in there. You screw on your tube, and when you do that, it primes the tube. and then you just snap it together with the electronic part. I like to call it the brain of the pump, and you're good to go. So the battery's built into that disposable, so you don't have to change batteries. It happens when you change the pump body. The priming and change out thing it's like 30 seconds start to finish. It's a really nice thing. You don't have to fill cartridges because it uses the pre-filled. And having the insulin in a glass cartridge makes it a little more stable. You know, insulin that's in plastic, it interacts with some of the chemicals in the plastic, and it's not stable for quite as long. So that's a nice feature. My favorite thing about this pump, though, is how fast and easy they make it to do a bolus. It's still safe. You have to go through certain steps, but there's one button, and Medtronic has a similar thing. They got a bolus button. This has a button. You press the one button, and right away you're at the point where you're entering your blood sugar. And then you hit another. Oh, I hit the wrong button. You got to hit it on the other side. There. It's this button. Ta-da. And then, yeah, then you're entering your blood sugar. Then you enter your carbs and you deliver. It's a very, very quick, simple process. And since what we do with pumps probably 95% of the time is bolus, they made that a really quick, easy thing to do. So the cartridge holds a little over 300 units, which is great. You know, people who are a bit insulin resistant, taking large doses, don't have to change it as often. The company's also found really responsive. Users have called in suggestions that they've already incorporated into the pump. They're able to submit to the FDA little minor changes and get them put in pretty quickly. It's waterproof. What else I like about this? It's got the Eagles green on it. I love that.
You can customize it, right? They have my
see, that's my phone.
Colors. Oh wait,
my phone.
Look at that.
Did you watch the Did you watch the Super Bowl?
Why are you going to ask me a question like that?
I don't know. You're in 49ers country. I figured since they weren't in it, you might not watch it.
I wouldn't have watched it regardless.
Bunch of fair weather fans. That was fun. It's a carb counting phenomenon. You know, the Super Bowl. There should be like a Super Bowl of carb counting because you could eat the weirdest stuff at a Super Bowl party, and it just piles up and piles on.
It's all great stuff for blood sugar maintenance.
Yeah, the dip and all different assorted chips and sandwiches, and the folks we went to made pepperoni bread. How are you going to count carbs in pepperoni bread? Please.
How are you even going to keep track of how much of it you ate, let alone how much carbohydrate is in it?
Exactly. You got to kind of go back and watch the videotape and see how many of those pieces you really had. There should be carb counting video. You could use that when you're low, and you go back and you say, wow, did I really eat that? It's like, I had 4 Pop-Tarts, and then, oh my God, I drank that, half a gallon of juice. Yep. And then we had this like cinnamon bread.
Videotape ourselves eating.
I had 5 slices of cinnamon. Wait, you got to add it all. You need a calculator. You realize you had 245 grams of carb, and you were supposed to have, what, 15? Well, so you only went over by 230 grams.
Well, and then it's just math from there.
It's just simple math. Yeah. And when you're low,
it'll probably work out great.
Math is not the easiest thing to do when you're low.
There's somebody a couple people in the chat room who are talking about the anxiety of inserting either pump insertion sets or also the Dexcom sensors, right? So this can be, we have a lot of folks who are in the chat right now who are sort of long time people with diabetes and have been dealing with needles for ages and ages. And we also have some folks who have not been dealing with needles for ages and ages. And personally, I very much relate to getting freaked out by the insertions of these things. I used to have a lot of anxiety around pump insertions before there were inserters, and it was just a ginormous needle that you just inserted by hand. So we have some folks looking for tips on inserting whatever it is, either a Dexcom sensor or a pump, and kind of getting past that psych out scary part.
I think one thing everyone has to remember is that if you go into it thinking, I got to do this every few days for the rest of my life, it's going to be overwhelming, and it's going to hurt 10 times more if you think that way. You have to think of it as a one-time thing, and you have to take a bit of a leap of faith. And I talk to people about this when they're considering pumps. There's nothing natural about wearing a thing with tubes that connect to your body. It's not a natural thing. Nobody would go on an insulin pump if they didn't have to or need to. But you take a leap of faith that you're going to try it, see what it's like, and then decide whether you're going to stick with it or not. And you could think the same way about inserting either a sensor or a pump infusion site, that you're doing it on a trial basis just to see what it's like. 99 out of 100 times, if you insert these things correctly, you feel virtually nothing. So you have to think that way. You have to just give it a try, realize it's not the mega deal that you made it out to be. Now, that said, there are some other strategies for just minimizing the discomfort when we do these. Inserting on the back of the body rather than the front. There's a lot less nerve endings on the back of the body. The abdomen is a sensitive area. So inserting on the upper buttocks, lower back, maybe the love handles there's much less sensation you feel doing it there. And picture in your mind also that what you're inserting it's a needle, but the needle stays in just for a split second. What stays in you is that little flexible piece. It's a plastic tube if it's a pump. It's a little metallic filament if it's a sensor. And it's in a fat layer. And you know what's not in the fat layer, Emily?
What's not in there?
Nerve endings. So you're not going to feel it when it's in. You may feel a tiny pinch when it breaks through the skin, but where it's going into that fat layer, there's no nerve endings there. You're not going to feel a thing. So there are numbing solutions that can be used for those who are totally schizoid freaked out by it. There's a stuff called EMLA that can numb the skin. I find that it shouldn't be necessary. We've never, our practice, we put thousands of people on these things. We've never had a situation where someone had to use that stuff. But if it is an extreme case of an anxiety over the needle, then go for it. Now, both with the sensors and the pump sites, as you mentioned, there are insertion aids for these things, little like spring-operated or push-button devices that will pop the infusion set or sensor in for you. So it does make it a little easier. Instead of holding a needle and sticking it into your body, you're putting a device on your body where you don't even see the needle, and you're pressing a button. So it's a little easier to take. You have any tricks you've used?
None that I should probably share. Yeah, I've tried a lot of things.
Your favorite beverage.
This was
So you drink a lot of Dr. Pepper before
issue for me. When for folks who have not been on pumps for a super long time, pumps didn't used to have any of that spring-loading stuff, so it really was just a needle that you stuck under the skin, and it just stayed there. There wasn't a flexible cannula. It was just a needle, and then you taped it down, and there was a tube that might get yanked on and jostled and all this stuff.
You couldn't even disconnect at the site.
You couldn't disconnect it, and your pump wasn't waterproof, and showering was weird. So I started pumping back when all that stuff was the case, and seriously, it would easily take me half an hour to get that needle in, and that was half an hour of shaking and sweating, and I went into the process. It was really a nightmare. And when the Omnipod came out, I switched to it as soon as I could because it's spring-loaded. You can't see the needle. You push a button, and the thing goes in, and that absolutely changed my life.
Yeah,
and at this point, I've gotten better with it. Sorry, go ahead.
Your needles have become so much thinner and smaller over the years, too, just to add. I did want to come back to your comment before about you don't want to share the way I don't encourage people to get drunk and insert their stuff because you start making mistakes. However, there is something to be said for relaxing, and there are different ways people relax.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch something funny on TV, think about something really funny. Music can work really well. Paced breathing. I keep a copy of the song "Peaceful Easy Feeling" by the Eagles here in the office, and I'll play that to someone who's really uptight about it, and I tell them, just sit down, think about your happy place, and the Eagles song starts playing, and relaxation does wonders for alleviating discomfort and nerve sensation. So any way you like to relax, go for it.
That's great advice. So we have a ton more questions that have been coming in the chat room, and one is from a mother of a child who has type 1 diabetes and is in the honeymoon phase right now. And she says that actually his insulin production is really variable, and it seems like there are times when he's producing a lot of his own insulin and times when he's not, and so it's really hard for them to figure out insulin dosing and carbs, figure out the whole thing. So she's asking how long this might go on and what to do about it.
Well, it tends to go on for weeks to months, not generally much beyond that. And to be honest, I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. The major goal is just get comfortable doing the shots, counting carbs, things like that. Keep the insulin doses conservative to avoid low blood sugar, because he's probably not going to have a lot of significant highs. And what you think of as highs, we think of as, oh, that's just a little problem. You might see blood sugars of like 150 to 180 and say, oh my God, that's too high. But hey, once he's completely done producing his own insulin, you'll thank the diabetes gods for readings like that. So relax a little bit about it right now and enjoy the honeymoon, as it were. And it will fade over time. You'll know that he's producing very little of his own insulin when he starts waking up in the morning with some higher readings. If he's waking up and they're still pretty close to normal, he's still got good insulin production internally. But once you start seeing those highs in the morning, then it's time to start really ramping the doses up.
I'm going to circle back actually to a question that I meant to ask a little while ago when we were talking about needle phobia. And that is that it seems like a lot of healthcare professionals think that people are really afraid of needles, and potentially not everyone is afraid of needles. So particularly in the case of folks with type 2 who are facing potentially going on insulin, it seems like a lot of times there's a desire for doctors to keep them off of insulin, at least in part, that their patients will be afraid of the needles or just won't like them the way that the rest of us love them. And so won't take their shots, basically. I'm going to prescribe you insulin, and then you're not going to take it because nobody wants to do that. And so doctors really try to wait till the last possible moment to prescribe insulin to people who really need insulin. And so the person who is noting this in the chat room was saying, probably not as many people are that afraid of needles as doctors think, and they want the medication that they need to have, and probably most people are willing to take it even in injection form. And the question is, do you agree with that? Do you find it to be the case in your practice that most people actually aren't as afraid as the overall healthcare system seems to think?
Abso-freaking-lutely. It's scary how many people are deterred from taking the injections that they need and would benefit from. I work primarily with type 1s, and what we often see is people who are on injection programs but not getting enough mealtime shots, or they're told, well, you don't have to bother taking a shot with your snack because their healthcare provider thinks, oh, it's just a nuisance to have to take that. Meanwhile, this patient doesn't, they're comfortable with just taking the shot, and their blood sugars go haywire when they don't take one, but their doctor said they didn't need one. So you're absolutely right. The vast, vast majority of people with diabetes get over that hump of getting comfortable with the injections pretty quickly and pretty easily, especially with the tools we're using now. But it's still in the back of a lot of prescribers' minds that I've got to keep people off of injections. They'll reject it. They'll hate me. Blah blah blah. And it's just generally not. It's really not the case.
Here's a question from another parent in the chat room about skiing. This comes from M. West, who says, our daughter has had type 1 for 20 months. She's 15. We've gone skiing 2 times, and she has had a lot of high blood sugar while skiing, maybe adrenaline. She does a temporary basal rate of 60% at night to avoid getting low and is stable during the night. We're going skiing again in mid-February. Do you have any tips?
Well, I like your comment about the adrenaline, Emily. You learned a thing or two along the way here.
That was M. West's comment. I was reading.
Okay.
M. West has learned a thing or two.
M. West has learned a thing or two. Yeah, some forms of exercise will make blood sugar rise. It's not the physical activity that does it, it's the emotional, mental component. If it's something that is exciting or competitive, or if it's a super high intensity, the adrenaline factor does kick in. The hormones we produce will offset what the activity does. So you got hormones raising it, activity lowering it, and one may just outdo the other. And if she's producing a lot of those adrenal hormones, her blood sugar will go up. If it was me, and if I recommended, you were a client of ours, I'd probably recommend, first off, wear a continuous monitor while you ski so you can track things. Try without any adjustments, keep the insulin at the normal levels and see what happens. Don't eat any free snacks without taking insulin for them, and see what happens. If the blood sugars are still going up, you may need to bolus a little bit extra or raise the basal a little if you're on a pump to keep the sugar stable. The reduction at night is a brilliant idea, because after a hard day of skiing, especially if it's cross country, you're going to be very sensitive to insulin for a while. So during the night, you're going to need less, so the basal reduction is a great idea. So keep doing that.
Awesome. Here's a question from McFly about different rates of insulin sensitivity depending on where you put the insulin, either where your pump site is or where you're injecting. Do you have thoughts or advice about figuring out different sensitivity rates and then how to account for them?
It shouldn't matter.
What?
Really shouldn't. It shouldn't matter. You can inject the abdomen, the butt, the leg, the arm. It might change how rapidly the insulin absorbs, but it shouldn't change how much that insulin brings the blood sugar down. So once it gets to the bloodstream, it works the way it works. That's not going to change. But if you inject in the arm and then you do some arm exercise, it's going to absorb pretty fast. That blood sugar may come down in 2 hours, whereas if it was injected into the abdomen and you sat around, it might take 3 or 4 hours for that same dose to work. But the amount that it lowers the blood sugar really shouldn't change.
So really, in terms of accounting for, and actually McFly did say absorption rate. I misspoke in repeating the question. In terms of accounting for that, would you suggest that people actually time their injections differently according to where they're going to give it?
Yeah, potentially. It's more an issue if you're going to exercise soon after giving a bolus of insulin. If you're not going to exercise, it doesn't matter a whole lot. You can give the insulin anywhere; it's going to absorb about the same. But if you have the pump site or the injection site on your thigh and you walk or run afterwards, it's going to accelerate the action of the insulin quite a bit. So giving the insulin later would be a good idea, and giving it earlier if you're not going to exercise is a good idea.
Our member Ellen in the chat room gets some really serious hyperglycemia, that's high blood sugar, after inserting a new pump site. And she's wondering what might account for that. She says that she doesn't have the pump off for more than about 10 minutes between one site and the new one. and what she can do about it.
A couple of things could cause that from what I've seen. One is if the cannula doesn't prime completely, so you have to make sure you give that little extra bit of insulin to prime your infusion set. Not the tube, but the infusion set after the introducer needle's been removed. Make sure you're giving that little extra bit. You know, with the angled sets, it's usually somewhere between 0.7 and 1 unit. And with the straight, the 90-degree insertion sets, it's usually about half a unit to just fill the cannula up. The other reason we sometimes see high readings after a site change is that the insulin needs to form sort of a critical volume under the skin before it starts to absorb outwards. It's kind of like if you have a riverbed that's completely empty, the water's not going to flow until you fill the river first. And it's the same thing with the insulin. Until you have a kind of a ball of insulin under the skin, it's not going to flow and absorb out to the bloodstream very well. So that's why it's a good idea to change the set before a meal. Giving that bolus right away, a substantial bolus, helps get the insulin flowing well. One other reason is that when you insert an infusion set, there's sometimes a little bit of an inflammatory response in that local area that might inhibit the absorption of the insulin. So a lot of people find that they just routinely give a little extra when they change their set. They might give a half, a whole, or whatever, however many units they think they need to overcome that little bit of insulin absorption issue that happens right away. I'd say probably half the people I work with see some pattern related to their blood sugars, related to their site changes and when they do them. So that's something we try to have them keep track of. If we can't get it from a download, we just have them try to keep track of when they do their site changes so that when we do look at their data, we can evaluate and see if there's kind of a blip in the radar every third day or every other day when they do a change. Then we can come up with strategies for fixing it. It's a nice thing about doing a lot of downloading of data with our clients is, you know, they can be in Timbuktu and we can figure these kind of things out.
Right. Gary is the data guy for sure. And you can and I've worked with Gary, everybody, for my own management. And something that was awesome is I could download something that to me looked like an absolute random numbers generator off of my Dexcom, which is what I wear. And Gary could make some sense. And I'd send it off thinking, what is he going to do with this? This is total chaos. There is no pattern in here. And you found patterns. So that's super useful.
When I started working with Emily, she was a 90-pound weakling. Now, show them your muscles. She is in good shape.
No.
She's a dancing fool.
A fool, perhaps.
How's the dancing going?
Going well.
Yeah.
Going really well. I'm doing more biking right now than dancing. I'm preparing for a big, long, week-long bike ride.
Really? How far are you going to ride?
I am doing the AIDS Life Cycle ride. It's a giant fundraiser riding from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And I'm currently biking my buns off in prep for it.
It might interest folks to know we're offering a free webinar later this month on exercise and blood sugar control. It's part of our kind of Type 1 University service. Every month we're doing a free webinar. And let me tell you what the date is for this next one. But anyone who wants to register for it just needs to send an email to my office manager, and she will put you on the list. We have to email everybody the login information, but it is completely free. Let's see, what are the dates on this? I really should know this off the top of my head. Okay, we've got one on February 17th. That's a Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we have another one on Thursday, February 26th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So if anybody wants to take one of those classes, take one of those webinars, it's free. Just email info@integrateddiabetes.com. Let us know if you prefer the Tuesday the 17th or the Thursday the 26th and we will send you all the login info and a copy of the slides and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Hey, Gary, are you able to go over by a few minutes?
I'm a little tight today because I got a patient coming in, but
okay. Then so we still have a bunch of questions in the chat room. Let me just ask one more, and I'm sorry, folks, but Gary will be back. Today is February. In April, Gary will be back again. So bring your questions back again, and I'm really sorry that we didn't get to all of them today. But let me pick one real quick out of the list that's here. Rick asked a question a while ago. I'm looking for it. Sorry, guys. A good question about, here we go. We have many folks here on 2 Diabetes who are facing issues of trying to get insulin pumps approved when they have a C-peptide of about 1. What has Gary's experience been with getting pumps approved, and do you have any strategies for folks who are getting some pushback from their insurance?
Well, most private plans don't care about the C-peptide. It's Medicare that's more an issue, and Medicare's guidelines are pretty strict when it comes to that. If you have a positive C-peptide and you are still producing the monicum of your own insulin, you probably could manage reasonably well on injections. There's some things about pumps that are really unique, but you can still manage fairly well on the shots. But with most private plans, even with the C-peptide that's a little bit above the normal threshold, they usually still approve them. Typically, you just have to go through an appeals process. Now, you bring a letter from your doctor, you state your case, why you need it, and be specific. Talk about some of the things that pumps bring to the table that you just can't do with injections. And the more appeals you go through, the better your chances for success, because appeals cost insurance companies a lot of money. They don't want to have to keep going through those because it costs them a fortune. So it's kind of like the squeaky wheel getting the grease. If you just squeak a little bit, they'll often take care of you.
That's a frustrating fact. Okay, Gary, we will let you go because you have a patient coming in.
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't stay longer. But if you want to, you can forward me questions. If there are email addresses that people include, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great.
And my website has a lot of information on stuff like this. Integrateddiabetes.com. So there's a lot of info there on pumps and CGM and whatnot, and also info about what our practice does if anyone's interested in getting some additional help with their diabetes management.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, Gary. Folks, if you prefer to ask your question in this format, remember that we will have Gary back again in 2 months. Bring your questions then, and in the meantime, you can find him at integrateddiabetes.com. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
See ya.
Bye, Gary.